Hey guys, alright, today we are going to be watching Caesar Marches on Rome 49 B.C.E. by Historia Civilis. I feel like, honestly, I probably should start really saying this at the beginning of every video. Not a Roman historian, I am a Anglo-Saxon historian. I studied the late 800s, early 900s. So do not be surprised when I do not know information, because I've gone through the comments on older videos. Well, I read every comment every time I see a notification pop up that I got a new comment. And there have been comments, quite a few, that are like, oh, you don't know this? It means you're not a historian. Well, one, I also don't really need to say this because I don't need to prove anything to you. But two, I study a specific time period. I'm sorry I'm not gonna know the information that you know, because you have the time available to you to go in depth on certain historical time periods or events that I cannot. Because one, I'm still in university, so that means the classes that I am in, I have to study what those classes are teaching me. There aren't classes for Nazi Germany. There aren't classes on Rome. They don't teach that at university. So, yeah. I don't know fucking everything. That's why I'm watching these videos, so I can fucking learn, people. Alright. Let's go ahead and dive into the March on Rome.
In 49 BCE, a provincial governor named Julius Caesar led an armed insurrection against the Senate and people of Rome. He commanded 10 legions, which was a lot, and although they remained personally loyal to him, most of them were hunkered down all the way up in Gaul for the winter. Only one, the 13th Legion, was in any position to be of use in the short term. At half strength, the 13th consisted of approximately 2,500 soldiers, and the moment these soldiers crossed into Italy, it amounted to a declaration of war. Way up in Gaul,
so Caesar's close friend and right-hand man Labienus had been
left in charge of Caesar's legions in his absence.
That
Labienus knew that there was a political back and forth going on in the south, but assumed that everything would be fine.
Late Roman Republic.
Everything was not fine. When negotiations broke down, news started trickling in that Caesar had risen up in open rebellion and was in the process of marching on Rome. Labienus was shocked. Let's not forget that up until this moment, Labienus's achievements in Gaul had been truly remarkable. He had spent the last 10 years leading semi-independent military operations in Caesar's name. Labienus was the only man Caesar trusted to take command of the Republic's largest army in his absence. In fact, I would argue that Labienus deserves half the credit for the conquest of Gaul. Unlike Caesar, Labienus actually lived on deployment with the legions. And unlike Caesar, Labienus's military record was an unbroken string of victories. Without any exaggeration, Labienus was up there with Pompey and Caesar as one of Rome's greatest living generals. And this fact may have caused some animosity. Had Labienus devoted the last 10 years to his own advancement rather than Caesar's, he would have been one of the most influential men in Rome. Now, Labienus was over 50, and if he was ever going to translate his military success into political power, it was going to be as one of Caesar's men. Caesar noticed this shift in attitude. As time went on, he granted Labienus more and more independence, and gave every indication that the Gallic provinces would be his whenever Caesar returned to Rome. Finally, Labienus would get an independent command. Some whispered that the consulship might follow. But then, Caesar rose up in open rebellion against the Senate and people of Rome. From what we can tell, he didn't even bother to consult with Labienus before doing so. Labienus was angry. I would have been angry too.
Poor Labienus.
Labienus had hitched his wagon to Caesar, and now Caesar had decided to foolishly run off a cliff. And it wasn't all about ambition. If we are to believe Labienus's surviving words, which in fairness come to us through biased sources, he considered taking up arms against the Senate morally
So do a
repugnant.
lot of
Absent
Roman
any data
sources.
to the contrary, I see no reason not to believe him. This was the most important decision of his life, and taking his reasoning behind it seriously is the least we can do. Without too much fuss, Labienus immediately left camp, accompanied by a large contingent of cavalry that were personally loyal to him. He made no attempt to bring along any of Caesar's legions. Once free, Labienus
leaving the
publicly
legions without a
denounced Caesar
overarching
as a
commander?
traitor and pledged his loyalty to the Senate. He would join up with the Pompeians in Italy. This was an unexpected blow to Caesar. The two had been close friends for at least 14 years, probably
Drama.
longer. Labienus had earned Caesar's
make a movie out of it?
absolute confidence. It was a big deal. But for what it's worth, Labienus made no attempt to stab Caesar in the back by stealing his legions. He could have, but he didn't. That's worth something. Caesar ordered his men back in Gaul to pack up Labienus's personal belongings and have them shipped to Italy. Some historians have described this as a callous reaction to a loss of a friend, but I don't see it that way at all. Labienus had lived in Gaul for 10 years, and then just walked away with nothing. To my eyes, it's a small act of compassion to be like, sure, follow your conscience if you must, but you're gonna need all your stuff once you get back to Italy. When Cicero learned that Labienus had defected from Caesar, he wrote, "Labienus seems to have condemned a friend of his of a crime for the sake of the Republic." Continuing, he wrote, "I judge Labienus a hero. It has been a long time since a more glorious political move. If Labienus has accomplished nothing else, he has caused Caesar pain."
God damn,
I would add to
savage.
Cicero's thoughts. If Labienus
Cicero,
had accomplished
damn.
nothing else, he had deprived Caesar of a skilled lieutenant. In that respect, he was irreplaceable.
Cicero
When news
fucking
traveled
putting down the
south, there
smack
was
talk.
panic on the streets of Rome. The Senate was as surprised as anybody. They had been keeping a close eye on Caesar's legions north of the Alps. If these legions moved, they told themselves, that meant that Caesar was gearing up for an invasion. Well, those legions hadn't moved. Caesar invaded anyways. Now, the recriminations began. The warhawks in the Senate started pointing fingers, arguing that Pompey had walked them into this mess. It's not true, by the way. If anything, it was the other way around. The warhawks walked Pompey into this mess.
Man,
There were
if Pompey
legions
had won,
mustering to the
that's such
south,
an
but they
interesting
wouldn't be ready
thought.
for some time. And even when they were, these raw recruits wouldn't stand much of a chance against Caesar's hardened legion. There were more experienced legions in Spain and Greece, but it would take months to get them over to Italy. In the defense of the Pompeians, it was winter, and they had assumed that they would have months to get ready. They were just wrong. In Rome, those who could packed up their belongings and fled the city.
They
When
yeeted out of
Cicero
there.
learned that
Yeet.
Caesar's march south was creating a steady stream of Roman refugees, he remarked, "Are we talking about a Roman general here, or Hannibal?" Pompey could see no way around it.
Goddamn,
He would
Cicero,
not
so
be able
savage.
to mobilize a resistance in time. He would have to temporarily abandon the city of Rome. His reasoning was sound. He had access to the vast resources of Rome's provinces. He had more legions. He had more money. He had the Senate on his side. The longer this conflict continued,
is
the
the
stronger
Senate.
Pompey would become. Caesar's only hope was to force an early confrontation. By pulling back, Pompey denied Caesar this opportunity. It was the right call under the circumstances.
God, it's so. I just gotta add, it's so cool when you talk about stuff like this kind of history, because this is like big brain generals doing fucking 5 steps ahead moves on each other, like 5D chess. Like there is no denying Caesar and Pompey are the. I mean, Scipio Africanus is really good, but like, I think if you go for just general. What more? Who more people know of? People know more about Caesar and Pompey than they do of like other Roman generals, right? They've heard the name. A lot of people, if you've taken a history class, there has been mention of Pompey and Caesar, right? And obviously, you don't really learn too much about them because schools don't go in depth on Roman history for obvious reasons, because it's so long ago and there's other things people need to talk about, right? That's a whole other debate as to whether or not how important Roman history is. It's important, but the things you kind of need to know about Roman history, I'm gonna just say this now, is you really just need to know that Rome set up the governmental systems for Europe to usher in the medieval age, which then, because of the governmental systems that had been established by Rome, this allowed for the creation of like the feudal system. It just steamroll effect, right? Because, you know, before Rome, much of Europe was not really had a different style of government system, right? This is something that you could talk about for fucking ever. So I'm gonna stop while I'm not really ahead, but I'm just gonna stop there. But yeah, when the average person probably knows more about Pompey and Caesar than they do about any other general, so I'm gonna say they are the two greatest Roman generals in history. So now that I've said that, now that I've established that, this is the two greatest generals in Roman history who could easily, if any circumstances changed, if one person had a bad day, that determines the outcome of this civil war, right? Pompey could have just as easily won as Caesar had won in this. It was not a sure thing. Caesar could have lost just as easily as Pompey, right? Pompey was the one that just got unlucky, at least in my opinion. But also, you know, Caesar's in the more tactical advantage here, right? He's got much of his legions consolidated, whereas Pompey is split up, right? But yeah, and these are veterans, and these are veterans. So like, if you know, the one veteran. Anyways, that's enough of that. Let's get back to the video.
But that doesn't mean it was popular. Being forced to abandon the capital isn't a great way to start a war. Rome's most prominent senators violently disagreed with the decision. Cicero was particularly upset. He asked Pompey, whom he had been privately calling the Senate's incompetent leader, if he intended to make a stand in southern Italy.
Damn,
Pompey
Cicero,
wouldn't give him a straight
savage.
answer. Cicero reluctantly agreed to obey the Senate's order, but decided not to go with Pompey. He would remain in the Italian countryside, ready to return to Rome at a moment's notice. The young senator Marcus Junius Brutus was also quite torn. On paper, it should have been a no-brainer, since his beloved uncle was none other than the arch-conservative Cato, but it was more complicated than that. Brutus's mother was Caesar's longtime mistress, and the two men seemed genuinely affectionate towards each other. Plus, there was an additional wrinkle. When Brutus was a child, Pompey had personally ordered the death of his father. The hatred ran deep. To this day, Brutus could barely bring himself to speak to the man.
Spicy.
After an intense period of soul-searching,
Fucking Game of
Brutus
Thrones.
decided that the Republic's integrity was more important than his personal feelings. He pledged his loyalty to his father's killer and accompanied Pompey into southern Italy. Domitius Ahenobarbus, another powerful senator, was angry. Domitius was the guy who had been selected by the Senate to replace Caesar in Gaul whenever he resigned his command. Now, Domitius was one of the many who were furious at Pompey's decision to abandon the capital. Without bothering to consult with Pompey or the rest of the Senate, Domitius grabbed 10,000 militiamen and raw recruits and marched north. He would stop Caesar's advance or die trying. This was not as crazy as it might seem. Against Caesar's one half-strength legion, Domitius would have outnumbered him 4-1. However, things had changed in the last few weeks. As soon as he crossed the Rubicon, Caesar split up his tiny legion and captured 5 cities in rapid succession, all uncontested. One of these detachments was led by Mark Antony, who I would like to note was still technically a tribune of the plebs. Tribunes were forbidden to leave Rome while in office, and not only had Antony left the city, but here he was returning at the head of a rebel army. Things were so chaotic at this time that it never even occurred to anybody to strip him of office, but they should have. Now that Caesar had a foothold in Italy, he ordered his legions north of the Alps to join him. He spent the rest of January capturing cities in the north. Apart from one tiny skirmish, all of the defending garrisons either fled or defected to his side. With reinforcements coming down from the north and defectors coming up from the south, Caesar's one legion ballooned into 5 or 6. By early February, Domitius Ahenobarbus arrived at the town of Corfinium with 10,000 men, which equaled like 2 legions. Caesar would have to pass this way before heading further south. Domitius knew that for him, this was probably a one-way trip, but if everything went well, it would give Pompey enough time to marshal his resources and march north, intercepting Caesar before he reached Rome. When Caesar's legions showed up outside the walls of Corfinium, the civilians inside the town immediately lost heart and tried to surrender. Besieged, and with no sign of support from Pompey, Domitius's 10,000 recruits and militiamen realized that this was a suicide mission. They mutinied against their commander, opened the gates of the town, and hauled Domitius before Caesar. Domitius was humiliated. He begged for death,
that's pretty
believing that
embarrassing.
the execution of a former consul would serve as a rallying cry for the rest of Italy. Instead, Caesar surprised everybody by publicly pardoning Domitius and letting him walk away a free man. Caesar justifies his clemency by saying that he had no interest in alienating politicians or the public with unnecessary brutality. If he was victorious, he wanted his victory to last, and to do that, he would need the cooperation of his former enemies. That's the reason he gave. The real reason might be a little less high-minded. When Domitius's 10,000 men discovered that Caesar had pardoned their former commander, many broke ranks and volunteered to join Caesar's legions. Now Domitius was angrier than ever. He immediately began planning a second high-risk operation to save the Republic. He'd be back. By now, Caesar had
Fucking
approximately
Terminator over
6
there.
legions in Italy, while Pompey was still struggling to rally 2 or 3 legions in the south. Pompey began to seriously consider abandoning the Italian peninsula. The Pompeians still held the overall advantage, even though locally they were outnumbered. In time, the combined strength of the provinces would surely be enough to overpower Caesar's rebellion. With his mind made up, Pompey began to evacuate his army from southern Italy. Pompey marched his legions to the port city of Brundisium to make the crossing to Greece. It didn't take long for Caesar to figure out where he was going. He abandoned all of his previous plans and made a beeline for southern Italy. By the time Caesar arrived, Pompey had occupied Brundisium, and half of his army had already sailed away. Caesar besieged the city, but a siege wouldn't do any good once Pompey's ships returned. He ordered a small fleet built and used them to haul dirt and rocks and wood out into the harbor. They used the material to begin building a barrier or a breakwater to prevent the Pompeians from escaping. Pompey couldn't let this happen. He responded by sending out ships of his own to slow down the construction. There was skirmishing back and forth for several days, and before Caesar could complete his breakwater, the Pompeian fleet returned. Pompey and the rest of his supporters set sail for Greece. They would live to fight another day. This was a missed opportunity for Caesar, but nevertheless, the Pompeian flight meant that Italy was now firmly under his control. It had been approximately 2 months since Caesar crossed the Rubicon. He was now finally free to enter Rome. The reception was not what he expected. The place was a ghost town. Those who could had fled the city. Those who couldn't opted to stay indoors. After all, Caesar was a traitor, an enemy of the Republic, and people had good reason to expect a bloodbath. But Caesar wasn't here for blood. He needed something else. Upon entering the city, he immediately called for a meeting of the Senate.
His own people.
Rome's best and brightest had gone
not
with
Romans,
Pompey, but there were a few senators still in the city. Caesar told this little makeshift senate that he wanted access to Rome's treasury. He was desperate. He was already paying his legions with IOUs, and he would need to continue paying them for at least another year now that Pompey had escaped to Greece. Caesar gave some BS justification for this request, saying that since Rome no longer had to worry about fighting the Gauls, the money previously spent on that should go to him instead. His reasoning didn't make any sense, but it didn't need to. None of the senators objected. In fact, none of the senators said anything. Caesar decided to interpret their silence as approval, which was not how voting worked, but whatever. Then, one of the few remaining tribunes of the plebs, a guy named Metellus, summoned his courage and vetoed Caesar's request. Caesar stormed out of the Senate house. He ordered his legionaries to occupy the forum, and led a group of soldiers up to the Temple of Saturn, which housed the Roman treasury. When he got there, the temple was locked and boarded up. Metellus stood before the entrance, blocking Caesar's path and continuing to exercise his veto.
Damn.
Caesar approached Metellus and told him that if he didn't get out of the way, he would order his men to murder him right there, before the gods and everyone.
It's messed up, bro.
After a beat, Metellus decided to step aside. Caesar proceeded to plunder the Republic's treasury, and immediately began to settle up on his IOUs. Up until this incident, Caesar had consistently argued that he was on the right side of the law. By coming into Rome and threatening to murder public officials, he demonstrated how untrue that was.
Yeah.
The rule of law was dead.
Pretty bad look.
Rome was in the hands of a
vibe.
conquering warlord. Even though Caesar controlled Italy, he was still beset with enemies on all sides, which meant that he had an important decision to make. Pompey was in Greece with 2 or 3 legions, and was already rallying the combined strength of the East to his banner. Pompey also had 7 legions active in Spain, which were continuing to operate independently. Caesar joked that to his west there was an army without a general, and to his east there was a general without an army. He could only deal with one of these threats at a time, but which would it be, east or west? After some deliberation, Caesar decided to head west to deal with Spain first. Here was his reasoning. At this moment,
I would say
Pompey
that's where
was
most...
in no position to attack. If Caesar spent a year campaigning in Spain, Italy would be relatively safe. The opposite was not true. If Caesar spent a year campaigning in Greece, Italy would probably fall to the Spanish legions. Spain was the immediate threat. Greece was the future threat. The
That makes
immediate
sense.
threat
I
had
can,
to be
I
dealt
can
with
see the
first.
thought process.
This must
Kinda.
have been an agonizing decision. Caesar understood that Pompey would become more and more powerful as the war dragged on.
Oh, there's more legions. Okay, there they are.
In his absence, Caesar would leave behind Mark Antony as the informal governor of Italy. Had things gone differently, this would have been Labienus' job, but he was with the Pompeians
So
now,
heartbroken,
and
Labienus.
Caesar needed a new number 2
Traitor.
that he could rely on. For the moment, Antony was that man, although as we'll discover, good help is hard to find, and Antony was no Labienus.
No, he was not.
Caesar prepared to split his army. He sent 3 legions to capture Sicily, with orders to continue on to Africa if they were successful. He sent another legion to capture Sardinia, which was close enough to Italy that they could return if something went wrong. Both of these expeditions would require naval support, which meant that Caesar would travel to Spain with his remaining 3 legions on foot. Finally, he sent orders to his 6 remaining legions in Gaul, instructing them to break camp and get themselves to Spain as quickly as possible. They would beat him there, but that was fine because time was of the essence. Every day Caesar spent in Spain, Pompey would be gathering strength in Greece.
Clap, clap, clap. That was a fucking good video. Historia Civilis. Now, this is, of course, one of his newer videos, right? Where he does a superb job at, well, I wouldn't say newer, because this is still fairly old since he uploaded it. But, aside from that, it's definitely when he started, like, I guess, just going more in depth on history, right? This is around the time I think when he started going more in depth. But yeah, you can definitely tell. Oh, so much more improved. His delivery of information is so good. I love it. I personally like the animation style his art style that he has, the little figures spinning on the map, right? Not detailed, but it conveys the information just right. Yeah, so that was Caesar marching on Rome in 49 BCE. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Leave a suggestion down below for what you want to see me react to next, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.